Good afternoon, everybody. This is Steve Wilson, and we're here today to have a webinar on our assessment tools, both our private well assessment tool, which was developed in 2016, and the OWTS assessment tool that we're working with folks to develop over this last summer. Okay, I do want to mention that we're funded by RCAP, whose funding comes from US EPA for this program, our private well class, and our water operator program as well. And this kind of reaches into both sides of our program, on the private well side as well as on the water operator side, which includes wastewater and decentralized information. This webinar, so we're a CE provider through NEHA, the National Environmental Health Association. As many of you know that participate in our private well class webinars. And so we did apply and receive CEs for this 1.5 hour webinar today. If you are, it's being recorded. There's time for questions at the end. And I do want to mention that through our wateroperator.org program, we're doing a webinar next week on resources available through that website on Decentralized. It's focused on tribes and how to support tribes, but if you're in the decentralized game, if you will, it will be beneficial to see what's out there. We aggregate information from a multitude of sources, and so encourage you to consider attending that as well. As far as the CE part of this goes, you can email us at info@privatewellclass.org. We'll provide a certificate of attendance, a copy of the slide deck, and then I believe in the handouts, there's information on your GoToWebinar screen. There's a handout tab, and there's more information there. We are also an Illinois LEHP credit provider. I mentioned RCAP, that stands for the Rural Community Assistance Partnership. If you're not familiar with RCAP, they're a national nonprofit made up of 6 regional nonprofits. Those are listed here. I'm in Illinois, so Illinois is part of the Great Lakes Community Action Partnership. If you're out west, it's RCAC. You can see there. And this matters because whatever state you're in, you should know your RCAP region, and especially if you're dealing with private wells, decentralized wastewater, centralized wastewater for small systems or small public water systems. They cover that gamut. Most of their staff are licensed operators, and they can provide support, technical assistance, all those things. If you need help contacting someone, well, on the private well side, a lot of times someone will contact us in a given state. We'll get them in touch with the private well lead for the region to set up either a workshop or to help with a well assessment or any of those things. Yeah, and so you can always contact us, or you can contact each region individually. So we're at the State Water Survey, which try to highlight what we do. We're unique in the country. Every state has a state geological survey, which is our sister agency, but only one other state has a water survey, and it only started not that long ago. We've been around since 1895. We're 128 years old, and we were established because of public health crisis related to typhoid and cholera. And so, you know, safe water and wastewater are both, drinking water are both paramount to eliminating those kinds of things from our environment. And just to show some examples, Urbana, Illinois, which the University of Illinois campus is in the Twin Cities of Champaign and Urbana, Illinois. Together, there's about 220,000 people in both towns. In 1915, this was Urbana's septic tank. And that straight pipe runs to Salt Fork, which direct sewage was entering streams. I know on this, it says, see the arrows, they're very hard to see on here. But if you look at the shade from that tree where it goes from black to light gray, that light gray is all the sewage entering Salt Fork. And so this is where we were back then. The water survey was involved in a lot of the seminal research related to wastewater treatment. Yeah, and it's a really cool history about our public health and all those things. I try to highlight that we've been around a long time working on some of these issues. Today, we're more of a applied research and outreach and education organization. We house the state's well logs in Illinois. We do a lot of support for communities and private well owners in Illinois and across the country. So I'm Steve Wilson. I'm a groundwater hydrologist here at the Water Survey. With me is Katie Buckley, who's our Water Resources Outreach Specialist, predominantly working on the private well class. She makes me look good and manages all the back end for all of these events. If you have questions that come up during the webinar today, put them in the chat or question box if you have one or the other in your GoToWebinar window. And Katie will make a list of those as we go. At the end, we'll pull those up and take a look. And so we will try to answer your questions. I won't promise that I can answer all the questions you may have. I'm less versed in wastewater than I am private wells and drinking water. And our wastewater person is in the field today, as it turns out. But we'll give it a try, or we can always get back to you. I also want to acknowledge a few folks. Sally Dolan, who is our environmental health specialist. She is our wastewater expert. Today she's in the field. She put together many of the slides we're using today, as well as conducted the 2 assessments we're using as examples. Her and I did those together. Sarah Hager is the NAWRA, the National Onsite Wastewater Recycling Association past president and adjunct professor at University of Minnesota Water Resources Center. She reviewed and commented on the tool that we're going to show today, as well as RCAP Solutions, a number of their staff. Together they have a wastewater working group, and they provided a lot of comments on the initial versions of the tool to get to where we're at today, which is version 1.0. And I also want to recognize Jennifer Wilson. Our assessment tool for private wells is a fillable PDF. We're putting the final touches on the fillable PDF version of the on-site wastewater treatment system tool. That'll be available probably Friday or next week. But she's put all those together. Where there's the private well tool has over 500 individual elements, and the on-site wastewater tool had over 330. Adobe Acrobat today is at a point where you can code in this fillable PDF so that it'll spit it out as an Excel file. And we want to make that capability available, but it requires hand coding each of those elements in those files. And she's done all that work. And I know it's not something you'll see. You see a fillable PDF every day, but to really make it functional, we put a lot into getting to that point. And so I'll just mention now that a lot of the assessment we did for this webinar, the 2 sites we went to, we didn't have the fillable PDF yet. So we worked with a PDF that we had to actually type in all the information. We will have that fillable PDF available very soon. And anyone who's here or who registered, when we send out an email next week that the recording is available, we'll include a link to both the assessment tools. I also want to recognize that NAWRA has worked with RCAP to develop this on-site wastewater treatment system user guide. It's on NAWRA's website. It really covers the full gamut of on-site wastewater treatment. It's a tool that you should be using as a guide if you're trying to use the assessment to with a homeowner that has an on-site wastewater system. There's a lot of really good information there on almost every topic. I can't, you just have to take a look. The PDF's available, it's free, and it's kind of a good companion for this tool to give you information on systems maybe you're not familiar with or haven't seen before. I know Katie wants to do a poll. I meant to talk to you about this beforehand, Katie, because this might be a little bit different audience. But one of the things we do as part of our funding from US EPA is identify the types of folks that are participating in our webinars. And so if you would, we do track this, especially if you're getting CEUs. If you would, Katie's going to open the poll.
Yep, the poll is open now.
Thank you. And if you would just answer that simple question, we really appreciate it. And we'll
Give folks about 30 seconds maybe to answer. We already have almost 80% in. All right, get your votes in, and I'm going to go ahead and close the poll here.
Great, thank you. All right. Yeah, it looks like about half our regulatory agency folks, and then we always have a number of health professionals as well. We have 8% as well owners. Thanks for joining us. I think you'll learn something today. If you are a well owner and you've not had a well assessment done, you can contact your RCAP region and or contact us, and we get you in touch with them, and they can put you on a list to have an assessment done. That's really, you'll see today, it's pretty useful to the homeowner, and it's all free. Okay. So private well assessments, let's start with that. We developed this in 2016 with a group of private well experts that included public health, extension, drillers, you name it, several regulators. And it's really comprehensive. It asks, well, we'll go through this today, but the idea was to create a tool that someone who is qualified and understands enough about private wells to actually fill this out can work with a well owner one-on-one and ask all the necessary questions about, have they tested? What kind of pipes do they have in their home? Do a site assessment, find the well log if it's available, and look at the geology and any issues that might be there. The idea is to do a vulnerability assessment in a lot of, that's what I would call it, on any potential issues that a well owner should be aware of regarding their well, and also to remind them of best practices like testing annually for coliform and nitrate and other things every 5 years or so. So it's as I mentioned earlier, it's a fillable PDF. RCAP, the regions have been conducting these assessments since 2016 or 2017 probably, and they've done over 3,600 around the country, which is really awesome. You know, when you think about the size of the program and the amount of effort that's gone into completing even one assessment, it's remarkable what they've been able to accomplish. On the other side of that coin, there's 23 million private wells in the United States. And so we have a long way to go to reach and educate all those folks. But what I will say is that for every well assessment that gets done, you know, overwhelmingly a satisfied customer, if you will, they tell their neighbors, their friends, and their relatives. And so if we can raise awareness on even the need for understanding your well better, that's the whole point, right? This is an outreach and education program. We're trying to help folks understand that they need to understand how to take care of their well and their on-site wastewater system. And so that's one of the side benefits of all this work. So the well assessment is really like a sanitary survey. If you're a health professional and you're in a state where the county or local health district is conducting a sanitary survey for a small community, it's kind of like that. It's a sanitary survey for a private well. It's a chance to educate the well owner about their situation, promote best practices, as I mentioned, and encourage communication. If you knew how many times I've had a well owner say to me, I don't want to call my local health department because they might tell me I can't use my well. And so then it's a chance to explain to them that that's just not the case. There may be a few local jurisdictions, especially in the Northeast, where a local health district may have that authority, but it's very, very unique if that's the case. It just isn't, it's not in any state law. And as you move west, and we're all counties in Illinois, none of them have any authority to prevent you from using your well. I mentioned, I got the number wrong here, I put 35 instead of 36. So on our webpage under the resource library, this is the private well class. You can find the tool, download it. It is a fillable PDF, as I mentioned. We developed a guide. Over time, we realized that you really have to have a fair amount of experience with wells to be able to use the well assessment tool. So we developed fairly comprehensive guide to go through step by step each section and inform people what and to help them on things like, backflow devices, information that you may not have a lot of expertise in. And then same with recommendations on the other end, trying to give people best practices to use if they're the one doing the assessment. And so that guide's also available on our website. And so then getting to the on-site wastewater treatment system assessment this year, we've worked with NAURA and RCAP to develop this on-site tool. And the idea is to provide a more comprehensive assessment of an on-site wastewater system at an individual home. The well assessment we developed in 2016 has a septic section, but it's about the size of section 7 that you see up here at the top on this picture. It's only 5 or 6 lines. It asks some of the basic information about a septic system. It doesn't really get into anything else that might be unique or advanced treatment or any of those kind of things. So the goal was to create a more comprehensive tool. We're seeing more of those advanced systems for one thing, and also getting into the details of an on-site wastewater system so that we can provide better outreach and education to the homeowner that has the system and help them understand how it works, and also look at what the potential vulnerabilities might be. And so the way we're going to go through this today is Sally and I went out and did 2 assessments. One is an aeration system, and one is a typical septic tank and drain field system. As far as sections in each one, the well assessment itself has all of these sections. I'm not going to read them, but you can see it gets through everything related to having a well as your water source, as well as potential sources like a septic system. And so, the well log is obviously a big part of that. Sometimes a well log is available, sometimes it's not. Hopefully that's getting better. We still see a lot of old wells where they won't be on file. I know I grew up on a well that was hand dug in 1933. There is no log for that. And there's just a lot of those kind of wells still in use. And so when that happens, that's information too, right, to share with a well owner. As far as the on-site tool, it was built so that it could fit with the well assessment, but also could be used independently. We have 17 to 18% of all the homes in the United States have private wells, but over 20% of all the homes in the United States have septic systems. So there's more septic or on-site wastewater systems, excuse me. There's more on-site wastewater systems than there are wells. And so we certainly run into places where someone may have an on-site wastewater system, but they're on community water supply. And we're going to go through 2 examples, so I won't go through this. Again, it's meant so that it could stand alone or be used together. Some of the sections are redundant, like who the assessor and the participant is, most of it, and water use, I guess, but most of it is unique to an on-site system. So here's our 2 examples. The 2 pictures on the left are our first example. That's the well in the top picture and their aerobic system, or behind their home. Those fake rocks cover up the 2 white pipes sticking out of the ground. And then on the other side, we have another well, and then it's just a picture of their home. This one's interesting because this Google Maps image, you can clearly see their septic tank and drain field from that image, because it was really eye-opening to see that. So I do want to mention that, so in Illinois, we've required well logs since 1968. And our State Geological Survey, who again is our sister agency, we share all these logs. They have this online mapping tool that's really terrific and shows you all the wells in the state that we have logs for. So we ran into this situation where the arrow points to the house that we're doing the assessment on, and every one of those homes, both on Doan Drive and Nicky Drive, so there's 13 or 14 houses there, I think, have a private well, and yet we only have records for 1. and all these wells were put in the early 2000s. So that's a red flag. That means we have a driller potentially who's not filing logs with the county and getting a permit, and which is illegal. And we're not a regulatory agency, but we use this information. And so there's one well there. It says it's 93 feet deep. And when I looked at that log, the driller was also listed for several in the area. So I decided to give him a call and just find out if he knew what was going on. I mean, I'm going to scroll forward. I might have to go back. Oh, yeah. So anyway, when I talked to the gentleman, he's retired. He says, we turn in every log that we do. The whole story that, and most of our drillers really are great at that. I only ran into one driller in my entire career over 30 years where I knew they weren't filing logs, which, I talked to the driller. I didn't talk to the regulatory people just to convince them that they should. But anyway, he said he did all this drilling and he knows he filed the logs. So I went back to this tool and just started looking around, and right up at the top of the page there, which the home is in section 16, and all of those, that arrow is pointing to a well or several wells that are in section 9. So when I clicked on that, actually 9 wells popped up all in the same location, and they all had an address of Dome Drive. And so what ended up happening is we figured out that the driller, when he filed the logs, this is like between 2003 and 2006, they put section 9 on every one of them instead of section 16. And so they're just mislocated in our tool, this on-site tool, so location's wrong. So we were able to find 10 of these wells because of that, and actually find the log for the home. And this is the original log. And it tells us so much information about the well and the area. It's PVC. It's got a 5-foot screen from 208 to 212. We know this is in a large sand and gravel aquifer in Illinois that runs across the center of the state. You can see that it's gray sand from 172 to 212. There's a lot of good information about the pump. A lot of things I'm going to show you in the well assessment in a minute came from this log, including the drawdown. We were able to explain to the owner, because it's not obvious to someone who doesn't know a lot about groundwater and water flow and drawdown. They pumped this well at 60 gallons a minute, and it dropped the water level to 140 feet. But then on the left side, it shows they put in a 15 gallon per minute pump, and they set the pump at 124 feet. Well, the water level dropped to 140. So where they put the pump would be above that drawdown, but it's because of they were pumping it 4 times as hard as the pump they put in the well. When you pump, anyway, the bottom line is we explain that to the well owner, and you can see at the top, this particular log had 16 and it got changed to 9 and number 21 on this page, and it's because all the other logs that came before it had been listed as section 9. And so, whoever's fault that is, I have no idea. But luckily, because of this assessment, we got all that corrected. We were also able to talk to the Piatt DeWitt Bi-County Health Department and get their all their septic information or private sewage information. And so this permit obviously helped as well. And it's one thing that was, there was a hand-drawn image of the house where the unit is, as well as the well. There's also a drawing that was done later, and this is facing west, I believe, but it's going downhill. There's surface discharge near a small ditch or creek. This is the location. You can see where the house is. There's a pool off to the north. There's a bunch of trees, and then there's a fire pit down by the small creek. And so when we put all the information in that we know about the system, there's 140 feet between the aerobic unit and the water well, and it's down gradient. the cleanouts at the corner of the house, we're able to, when we went out and visited, we were able to put all this information together. And the idea in the assessment in the end is you provide this to the homeowner. If they were near somebody else or near a source, or if there were cattle nearby or some other thing that might be a vulnerability to the well, then that would be shown on here as well to give them that information. And so here's their well up by the house, and then it's covered by another fake rock, just so it looks aesthetically pleasing, I guess. And so this is the private well or spring assessment, which I didn't mention, but there's a lot more springs out there in the world than I ever realized, doing most of the work I've done in Illinois. And so there are a lot of folks who use springs for their water supply, and they're a different kind of problem because they're almost always contaminated with bacteria. They're associated with the surface. They're a lot of, it's, then most of the time those need to be continuously chlorinated or disinfected with UV or whatever, but this assessment will allow you to do either of those things. So at the top, it's just who the assessor is, who the owner is, and their information. Then as you move through this, we ask about backflow devices on any of their outside hydrants or spigots. They're not doing any activities necessarily where that's much of a risk. In the first place, they weren't sure. They'd only lived there a year and a half. We did find the log in the end. Initially, we didn't have a log for them, but so a lot of this information came off of the well log. We know it's a PVC well, that it's grouted to 192 feet. That was on the log. We knew the depth and where the water unit's coming from. And for a sand and gravel well like this, the advantage is this could be, if it's properly grouted, which this appears to be, water has to come from the surface down all the way down into that unit before it can get into the well. It's solid casing down to 208. And so there's really no risk of surface contamination. So, I mean, this well could be in the middle of a farm field where they're applying pesticides, or even in a feedlot. I wouldn't put it in either place, but understanding the construction and where the water's coming from and how much casing you have all matter as far as how close to a source you might be. We mentioned in the lot that we had the wrong location for these 9 wells. And so we've sent that into the well records for folks at the water survey here. And so they should be showing up soon on that tool, the online mapping tool, in the right place. Again, a lot of this is information so that we can go through it with the homeowner. So the pump set at 124 feet, it's a 15 gallon a minute pump. Since they've been there, it's not been serviced, which we wouldn't expect. A lot of times pumps will last a really long time. But it's a chance to go through all this, and then when they have questions, you can answer them for them. Let them know, well, here's why we asked that. It's good to know. If your pump's 50 years old, you need to be concerned because it's a mechanical device, and they certainly can last longer than that, but typically a pump is going to last between 10 and 20 years. And so, you need to be understanding that there's going to be a cost to that. As well as the log had the static and drawdown and water level information, which is great because it gives you a good idea of how, quote, good your aquifer is. And if you ever have a risk of your well going dry, there are areas in the country, like we were just talking last week about an area in Pennsylvania where they have very low flow wells. They can only pump them at 1 to 2 gallons a minute. And even pumping at that rate, they may have 200 to 300 feet of drawdown when the pump kicks on. And so you have to be very careful there. And same way, especially in the mountainous regions, like on the western slope of Colorado, there's a gentleman we worked with who had a well that would only pump a 1/4 gallon a minute. And so he had a really small pump, and he basically just had it run 24/7 into a large cistern, 3,000 gallon cistern, and then he pulled water out of that when he needed it. And so when you take a shower in the morning or doing things, it would come out of that storage and then it would run all night and fill up as much as it could. But that's, it's all granite. There's very few fractures in that kind of rock. And so there's just, you just don't know how lucky you are if you have a good water supply like at this home. So as far as then, we also ask about plumbing. Obviously, lead is a big issue. Premise plumbing is a source. Typically, it's not in the ground or in groundwater. And so same with copper. And most of the time, if the house is before 2014, then lead solder or the solder could be as much as 5% lead. And we see that that does leach into the drinking water in the pipes if the water is corrosive or aggressive. And it really just depends on the chemistry. And so we ask if they have galvanized or copper or lead, because lead pipes obviously can leach lead. Copper pipes can leach both copper and lead from the solder, and galvanized pipes are also partially lead. And so knowing the water chemistry is important there. We also then ask if there's anything like a metallic taste or blue-green staining. Those would be indicative of copper leaching from into the water. We're fortunate, well, I'll get to that in the end, I guess, but we know a lot about the aquifer that this well is in. It's a large sand and gravel aquifer, and it's not typically known for having corrosive tendencies. So this I mentioned before, this is all we put into the well assessment for on-site systems. Is there a system? Is it a conventional tank? What is it? This is an aerobic system. It's fiberglass. We asked the last time they pumped it. It's really, basic questions about maintenance of the system and are they doing what they need to do. And what we identified when we talked to these folks is that they've had to pump it twice in a year and a half. And so it's filling up and there's some sediment in it. And so that wasn't the case with the previous owner who'd been there since 2006, I think. And so that's one of the concerns and an issue. And we think we've identified a reason for that, but we're not 100% sure. We always ask these miscellaneous questions if they have an emergency power source, meaning do they have a generator typically if it's in a rural area. I grew up on a farm. We had an ice storm in 1976. We didn't have power for 7 days. And if we didn't have a generator, that would have been a problem, is all I can say. But it's a lot of folks don't think of that as being an important issue, but almost every pump I've ever worked with is electric, and without electricity, you're not going to be able to pump water. So, and the other reason we ask distance to a public water system or rural water district, there's a lot of people that have wherewithal and know how to take care of their well or their septic or their on-site system. But there's also folks we run into who really have no idea, who call us when they've had a problem or call a community water supply operator thinking that they're on a public water supply when they actually have a well. And I've had more than one water operator tell me that story. And so in some cases, it may be an advantage to hook up to a public water supply. A good example of that, we have, and where I live in Champaign County in Illinois, we have a deeper Muhammad aquifer, which is the large sand and gravel aquifer I've mentioned before. And then we also have a shallower glassford aquifer, which is high in arsenic. And so just south of our community, some friends of ours were buying a home. And so I mentioned to them that they should check out the well first and make sure it's in the Muhammad. If it is, what was actually in the shallower sand. And so they tested it, and the arsenic was 75 parts per billion, which the health standard is 10 for a public water supply. So they had two choices. The community is encroaching on south of town. It's a lot of subdivisions and stuff have been built that way. And there actually is a subdivision right across the street from this home they were going to buy. And so I suggested they call the water company and find out if they had any lines there. It turned out they did, right across the street. And so in that case, it cost them $7,000 to run a line under the road and to their home, and they abandoned their well. The other choice was to add treatment, and be responsible for maintaining an RO or a filter system and testing regularly to make sure that they were being safe with their drinking water. And they had the wherewithal if they wanted to do that, keep their well, but they chose to go with a public water supply since it was so close, and it gave them the opportunity then to have peace of mind about where their water's coming from and if it's being tested and all those things. And I think that was good advice, and I think they made the right decision. And so that's why we asked that question. We also asked about if they've ever tested. Obviously, the motive here is over 2/3 of homeowners with wells have not tested their well before. They have no idea what their water quality is. And so in this case, it was tested for coliform and nitrate by the realtor before they moved in, and it actually had coliform. And so then it was shock chlorinated, and following tests showed that it was clear. And so the sale went through and all those things, but they've not tested for anything else. And that's actually, we recommend that you test for coliform and nitrate annually because they indicate a pathway into your well. It doesn't mean your well's safe if those are both negative. You could have arsenic or any other kind of constituent in your water that has no taste, no odor, no smell, and is colorless. And so, I mentioned to this homeowner, we know that there's arsenic in some places in the Muhammad Aquifer, which is the aquifer they're in, and so it really behooved them to test. Also, manganese has been identified as a potential health risk for small children. It causes neurological problems. Currently, it's not regulated by the EPA as a primary drinking water constituent, meaning for health effects. It's regulated because it causes staining. And so they want to test for manganese regardless. And they've got grandkids, they're over at their house all the time. And so, that's one of the things, folks don't realize. It's important to test not only for you, but for the folks that maybe come to your home. Water treatment. So we asked if it's been disinfected, and it had been, just because of the test revealed coliform in their sample. So the seller bleached the well, and those were their words. And as far as who disinfected the system, according to the realtor, it was a professional. And so, that's what we have to go on. They have a water softener and a carbon filter. So we asked why they have a carbon filter, and they didn't know, but I would say it's likely because of taste or odor, unless there's something else that the homeowner knew that they didn't share about the water quality, and which is another reason to test, because but so we can ask, what they know about their system as far as when it was installed, have they ever tested to make sure the softener is working correctly, some of those things. And so it's all, again, getting to helping the well owner understand what they need to do to ensure they have a safe water supply. This is the components in their basement. They had a water softener, a carbon filter, and a pressure tank. Nothing really out of the ordinary there. And then as far as we talk about soil properties and geology, we had a log, which is really helpful. We know the sand and gravel starts at 172 feet. It's mostly clay above that, which is great for protecting from surface infiltration. As far as the surface soil, we didn't have any information there. But then we also do a well inspection while we're there. Is the well accessible? Is it in a pit? You'd be surprised at how many wells we still see in pits, which are both a safety hazard and also a water quality hazard, because in a heavy rainstorm, sometimes those pits fill with water, and if it overtops the well, it's no different than a flooding event. Now you probably have introduced bacteria into your well. And then, just looking if it's got a proper cap and a vent tube, and that it's not in a floodplain, and all the common things that you might find or we have seen with wells. And if you've participated in our other private well class webinars, you've seen some pretty horrific pictures of animals in in wells, or heard stories from some of the folks who participated in our webinars about what they found in their own. So yeah. We also then do an inspection of the whole area as far as what in the area might be a problem. And so, you know, there's 4 other homes with wells and on-site wastewater treatment systems. Some of those are up gradient from this home across the street. So it's just something to be aware of. If these were all shallow wells or it was in a sandy area, then that'd be a concern. Especially a rural subdivision. If all the homes are lined up going up a hill, the house at the top of the hill has septic and it's shallow and all the wells are shallow, the water table is going to be going down that hill towards whatever low spot there is, whether that might be a ditch or a creek or a lake. And so the folks that are further down that hill are more at risk of shallow contamination if their wells are shallow. So it's just something to always be aware of. Again, in this case, given the amount of clay above the aquifer and how deep it is, we wouldn't expect any of these issues to really be a problem. We just identify it so we can explain it to the homeowner. And so then, you know, here's what we see for the whole region. There's a small creek running through, and there's, you know, besides the other homes that have wells and on-site systems, there's some farm fields. And the slope is toward that creek from both sides. So what we recommended, basically, you know, their well is really properly constructed and everything seems to be in working order. You know, in my opinion, the carbon filter is likely for taste or odor. We commonly see that. But since you haven't tested it for those other things, you really should evaluate inorganics and metals. We do know, again, this is the Muhammad Aquifer, and we know that there can be arsenic in that aquifer. It's very hit or miss where we're at, but in further west in Illinois, it's much more significant in the same aquifer. Yeah, and so I mentioned the manganese thing earlier, and because they should just, you know, if you have copper pipes or lead pipes or whatever, and the thing to remember about home premise plumbing like that is you can have copper pipes and have no issues. It isn't like copper pipes are bad. It's if the water is corrosive or aggressive, that's another term that's used, then it can be a problem because it can leach that pipe material. But if it's not, it can also form scale. So we see homes with lead pipes where there's no issue because the water's such that there's scale on the inside of the pipe, lining it, protecting the water from any kind of even contact with the lead. So understanding the water chemistry and talking to someone who's qualified to explain that is really the most important thing. And so, you know, we're here, these are both in Illinois, the water survey. Our job is to really work with and help well owners on one side of the fence here. So in general, yeah, this is actually a pretty nice site in that respect. The things that they need to do their due diligence, though, are to sample every year. You know, anything can happen. You can back up and hit, especially a PVC well with a riding mower, and it can crack it down at 10 or 15 feet. We've seen where trees near a well have cracked the PVC, and so they kept getting bacteria hits. And that's eventually what we figured out, is that roots had got around that casing, and as they grew, they squeezed and cracked the PVC, and that allowed near surface material to get in the well and causing a bacteria problem. They need to make sure they're maintaining the carbon filter. We've seen certainly where some kinds of filters have, when they're not switched out and they're left for too long, that they can harbor bacteria and actually become a source. Instead of protecting the homeowner, they're actually creating a problem. And so we encourage them to learn more about that and make sure they're doing the right maintenance. And that's the well side. So again, their well's in the front of the house, and as you go down the hill, there's a clean out right by their corner of their house, and then it goes down to their aerobic unit, and it discharges And they've got a really nice setup where their discharge is, it's right before it gets down into the floodplain. And so they've created a little wetland with rocks, and they're growing plants where their water discharges. I'll show you that in a second. So as we're looking west here, you can see the well and the rock, the fake rock, and they've got a little flower garden here. And straight, Sally's in red, the red shirt, and straight behind her, off her elbow, you can see where the aerobic unit is as you go down the hill, just for reference. And so the first two sections of the on-site wastewater system assessment are who the assessor is and who the folks that own the property are. And so I skipped that, but then as we get to section 3, it's about why, a lot of times we'll get a call, or RCAP will get a call from someone who wants an assessment done because they've got some sort of issue. And that's typically why people call us, when your well's working fine, you got plenty of water and water pressure and everything tastes great, folks go about their business. And then as soon as something goes wrong, they start calling and asking. And the goal of our program is really to help people learn more of the basics about their well and their on-site system, so that they can figure some of that out on their own, and they also have a better idea of what the problem might be, so they can ask better questions when they do have to call a professional. And so, this includes, there's a description, how we found that. The original owner was this Doug Upoff. He doesn't live there now. I guess it was in 2003, not 2006. All the information that's relevant, number of bathrooms, bedrooms, people living there, and the information they had about their installation and their pumper and all those things go in this information. It puts it all in one place. And again, the other part of this is when we're done with an assessment, we add the logs, we add the permits, we add all the pictures, everything that we put together, and then we include that in one large PDF that we give back to the homeowner that puts all of their information in one place about their well and their on-site system. And so if there's ever any issues, they've got all that, in one reference. I do want to mention that, I'm going to go back. We were still working on the fillable PDF. And so we started with a regular PDF, if you will, and that's what we used here and what these screenshots are. But this is how that's going to look now. And this is basically done. My staff have done a great job of getting all this together. They're waiting on me to go over it one more time. And hopefully I'll be able to do that today or tomorrow, because we want to be able to provide this to everybody as a fillable PDF. And again, as I mentioned earlier, and you can even export it into Excel, which is a huge advantage if you want to keep track of all the assessments you do, for instance, and have a way to really look at that information. So I'm just showing this because this is where we're at. All this is being developed now, and this next couple of years we're piloting this first version, which we expect to change after a number of assessments are done. And so this is where we're at. So going back to this particular home, in their permit, there was this document. The DeWitt Bi-County Health Department requires all aeration systems installed since September 24, 2003 to maintain a service contract with the licensed on-site sewage installer or aeration dealer for the lifetime of the system. So when we went to the house the first time, the homeowner mentioned that they have it serviced every 6 months, and we didn't realize that they have to, because that's the law that's been set up in that county. And so, yeah, this has been going on since 2003. And ironically, this says since September 24th, 2003, the original owner signed this on November 5th, 2003. So it must have just taken place at the time. But I thought this was interesting. I think, the county's being proactive in that respect. Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of opinions on those things, but it's certainly a good idea. Helps people understand and ensure that their system's working properly. Yeah, so getting through, so section 4 is about their water use. We know it's a well. Since we did a well assessment along with this, you know, some of this information is a lot more detail on the other set of pages we've already went through. This is, again, can be done independently of whether there's a well or not. And so they're not in a floodplain, for instance. We're looking at the landscape and where they're at, but the homeowner's only been there a year and a half. And so how high the water can actually get, they're not sure. And, you know, sometimes these small streams that run into, we're only about a half a mile from a major river in this case. And so when that gets backed up, some of these small tributary streams can get backed up pretty high. And so we don't really know for sure if that system's at risk where it's at or not. It looks like from the way the floodplain is, it's just sitting on top of all that, but it's less than probably 30 yards from the actual stream. And so, you know, that seems like it could be at risk at some point, depending on the size of the storm. It says it's not affected by surface water. You couldn't tell of any issues. It's as far as the vegetation, all that stuff. And yeah, they drive over it with small equipment. They mow over the line going from the house down to their aerobic unit, all that sort of thing. Again, we had a permit and a lot of information. There wasn't a perk test performed here. And so, you know, we just explain what that is. And you know, it's done sometimes, not all the time. My understanding from some of the folks who helped with this is that that's being done less and less. And then as far as the system itself, there's a place in here to put a diagram if you need to, but because we had all the information, we didn't actually draw our own diagram of the site or that information. Again, we were fortunate here that we found the well log and the septic permit and information and the as-built, so we have really all we need, and we're filling this in and explaining this to the homeowner as we go. So this is, I lost my train here, I'm sorry. Okay. This is the whole unit, if you will. Yeah, I'm on the wrong, sorry. So here's the green lid is for the aeration system. And then there's the discharge, or I'm sorry, I lost my notes. There's a aerobic tank, then the inspection port, and the third one is a chlorinator port. They do add chlorine tablets that are specifically designed for septic systems. And then the fake rocks are really just there to make things look aesthetically better for those three pieces. And down below, you can kind of see it here, is there's a discharge for the where the water discharges, and then that area behind that arrow is this little wetland they put rocks through, and I think I have a picture of all that. Yeah, so Sally's looking for the discharge, and then there's where the grate is. You can see it there on the upper right, and then their little wetland that they built is down at the bottom, and they put in their own plants in there, and actually it looks kind of nice. It's right next to their fire pit. So they've kind of made that an area they enjoy. You can see that that's in the floodplain for that small creek or ditch. And yeah, I guess that's it. The other information, again, this all came from their permit and as-built information. It's 45 feet from the home, the tank. It fills up. The one thing they said is they've had to pump it twice since they've been there in a year and a half, even though there's only 2 folks who live there. They do have family come into town. All their kids have kids, but they're only there for a week or 2 at a time. And so that was the only issue that was really identified as being not something that we could really explain. And so And it's an ATU. They have things checked every 6 months, again, according to the contract agreement they have with their vendor. And as far as these sections really just help us describe to the homeowner what kind of system they do have. And it covers a lot of other things that aren't in this system. Hopefully we've been able to cover most of the options that you might find in the field. This is their clean out next to the house, and then down in their basement is their alarm, which they said has never gone off since they've lived there. Yeah, everything seems pretty in order here for this facility or for this home. It's an ATU. Did I go backwards? What did we do here? Okay, so section 11 is all our site observations where we're out there. And again, I put this up. This is from I just put this up here this morning because the fillable PDF is available or just needs reviewed. What I'm going to show you in a second is what we used for actually doing this assessment, since we didn't have this available, but this is what it's going to look like. So you can just click a box, or you can put NA if there's no information. So this is what we have on the assessment we completed for the homeowner. And I took out some of the sections that were left blank because they weren't relevant. But in the final version, you'll be able to just put NA over in that text box, which I think it makes it look more complete. And that way the owner isn't looking at some of these questions and asking why they're not filled out. But there's a lot of information here on anything else that might have happened. We ask common questions. Is there sump pump connected? Have they had any backups? Is there anything else? Do they have an emergency power source again? That's an important question. All those sorts of things. Their alarm panel was in good shape. Everything seemed to work. And so this is just going through our due diligence to provide them information they need about their system. And then the section 13 for this is a set of recommendations. I highlighted the pumping schedule. So during our visit, we discussed that the septic tank required pumping twice in a year and a half. And the one thing, and Sally figured this out, is that the way their basement has an opening basement. It has sliding glass doors, and it's fully finished. There's 2 bedrooms down there and a living room that are being used. And so her theory, which makes sense, is that when either the other people moved out or when they moved in, they brought a moving truck through the yard and drove over the line, and that could have cracked it. It turns out that their tank is filling up and there's a lot of sediment in it, and that was never an issue before. And so we believe that the pipe is cracked and allowing sediment from the soil in somewhere between the house and the aerobic tank. And so we suggested that they inspect that, run it, and camera it to see if they can see anything wrong. So that's the one thing about this site that was something they can deal with. Other than, and this is just on the septic side, we already talked about the well side as far as that they need to really sample for inorganics and metals. That's the other thing I would say. And then we provide a lot of just general recommendations to help them understand and resources. They don't show it here, but all these are clickable down at the bottom, the additional resources. When I took a screenshot, that didn't come through for some reason, but we'll provide them a PDF of all of this that'll have those as clickable links. Okay, and so yeah, this is their system. I guess I'm not sure what else I wanted to say there. Oh, and at the bottom of the recommendations, there's also this section that we added at the end. Areas that you should consider asking a professional installer or pumper or a plumber or a local health authority for more information. So the idea with this section is that if they do need something done, we're not installers or inspectors or pumpers. We're trying to do an assessment to educate and provide outreach. But if there's something that really needs to be done, then this gives you a place to put that information and suggest that they deal with it. And again, it's up to the homeowner themselves. They can ignore it. We're hopeful, though, that if someone has enough interest in their on-site system, that they'll have us come out to do an assessment, that they'll understand that they may need to follow up with something. So, and then again, this shows it's page 7, page 8 has where you can add photos. What we've seen with the well assessment is RCAP has done those. They've gotten very inventive, their staff, at how they create these PDFs. But, you know, sometimes they'll include information about backflow devices if someone has a question about that, or, you know, these things end up being 20 or 30 pages long in the end, but it's all information that's relevant to that site and that homeowner. And so it's really useful, including pictures, so that when, you know, down the road, somebody's trying to figure something out, they can say, oh, well, this used to be this way and now it's not, what happened, or, you know, whatever it might be. Okay, so we're gonna go through quickly another example just of the septic side of things. We did a well assessment and a septic assessment here. This is a home in Vermilion County, which is east of us, where the other one's in Piatt County, it's west of us. But this is a Google Maps view. I forgot to change the font there. One of the things that really pops out at you is you can see the laterals or the lines, right, just for the system. And it turns out the little square that's inside the fence is actually their septic tank. But this particular view, just, I don't know when this shot was taken, but it really shows what's going on with this home and their on-site system. So that's their septic tank. Those are their lines, lateral lines, and those are actual chambers. And then there's an area right at the edge of the trees that's wet most of the time, or has standing water, and it's even has frogs and you name it. And it's actually coming up out of the ground in a lower elevation from the system. And we'll get to why in a second. And then their wells over here on the other side of the house. It's about 140 feet between the septic and the septic tank and the wellhead. And this well is shallower. We're not going to talk a lot about it, but I do remember the log for this was 28 feet of clay and then sand and gravel to 52 feet. But for some reason, instead of installing a sand and gravel well with a screen, they put in a large diameter bored well with a 3-foot concrete tile down to 52 feet. And so, yeah, the good news is there's 28 feet of clay from land surface down to the aquifer here. And so here's all the different pieces. The clean outs at the corner of the house, that wet spongy area, as I mentioned. When we were there, it was in full form like a wetland, very similar to what the last folks had, but it was standing water and spongy. I tried to walk in there to take a picture and I started sinking. And so, yeah, it was interesting. Again, here's their well. I'm not going to talk much about the well, but it was drilled in 2006, I believe, maybe 2003. And I already described and we did find the log. This is another case where the log, when we looked online on the mapping tool, a well didn't show up here. And so we contacted Vermilion County, and the gentleman with the county who does all the septic permit work also does all the well permit work, and he remembered this site. And so he was able to find the log because he knew who the driller was and the owner at the time. And he sent us an updated log with handwritten coordinates on it and said, you need to change this in the state system to put this in the right place. And then the other picture here is that bare spot is where the opening is for their septic tank. It's buried. It's not visible and not above ground. Here's our well log. As I mentioned, it's there's basically sand from 30 to 52 feet. It was dry until 42 feet. Yeah, the one thing we don't know, he didn't put any information in about pumping level. He's estimated at 1,500 gallons per day. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know who this driller is. I know a lot of the drillers in the state, but this person I've not ran into before. And so I've never seen it actually listed that way. But yeah, yeah, that's only 1,440 minutes, right, in a day. So that's just a little over 1 gallon per minute. This well will produce a lot more than that, given the sand that it's in. As far as their wastewater system, here's the original permit. It's a Bio3 diffuser system. So instead of using sand, it's plastic, is my understanding. Again, we're getting out of my comfort zone. That's why we have other folks here who deal more with wastewater issues. But it's a traditional system with a tank and a drain field. And so they did do a perk test here. You can see those results. It said 150 for the first example, 150 minutes, and then 180 minutes. So according to Sally, this is about average permeability. And so just providing that information to the homeowner and what it means. So this is their as-built drawing by the county. And you can see there's 9 sections to each of those chambers, 3 lines. It goes from the septic tank to straight into those 3 sets of chambers. And it's at the land starts sloping away. And I turn this sideways because, as you remember, here's this diagram. You can see the tank and the 3 lines. And again, the land is sloping a little bit away towards those trees. And so you can kind of see that here. There's 3 areas there where it's a little hard to see with this picture because my phone doesn't take great pictures, I guess. But it was more clear. You could see the little swales in the yard fairly clearly when you're there. And then behind Sally are all those. That's all wet and goes back in the trees, and there was water all the way back past the trees, standing water. Oh, I forgot I had a picture of that. So yeah, this is what that looks like behind all there. And that really shouldn't be happening, right? So, their water source is a well. They said, we ask if they have a water purification system, really meaning, in this case, they have a softener, but it's an opportunity to see if they have anything else that might use a lot of water that's going to affect the system. And then they're in an upland area. There is no surface water issues from, by the house. It's really the drain field itself is causing a surface water issue on a lower elevation away from the house. So it is green and lush. We see that issue. Try to explain to them that the reason it's that way is because the system's being overloaded a little bit, and so it's not able to drain like it should or percolate down into the below into the unit. And so what we learned here is, let's see, I'm on the right one. Yeah, so they did have a permit. We have all the same types of information. I'm not going to go through all of these. It's a conventional system. They pumped the tank in 21. The person who pumped it basically said your tank was completely full. And so we explained why they need to understand the number of people living there and number of bedrooms and make sure that they're pumping it on a more regular schedule. He didn't know if it had been pumped before that. And it's funny because, we do a septic webinar every July, and we always get questions in advance for those webinars. And there's people who swear that they've never had to pump their septic tank, and because they use additives or for whatever reason. And my answer is always the same. Well, just wait, because it's eventually going to be a problem if you don't pump it. So it's 1,000-gallon, 1,050-gallon tank, concrete tank. It was pumped through the manhole. It's not visible. It was completely full, as I mentioned before. And so again, as we go through this and explain it to the homeowner, we're able to explain why this is bad or why this is good, or here's why this is important, and we list it so that you can basically give them the tools. And the other thing is then to go through this as you're writing the recommendations and make sure you give them something in writing that explains, here's what you probably want to do here. Yeah, it's a trencher bed with dispersal media, chambers. It's this biodiffuser, 3 plastic leaching chambers. And then as we go through the site observations, the risers weren't visible. There were no odors, which is the one thing. When I stepped back into that wet area, you couldn't. It was certainly soft and mushy, and a lot of vegetation, but there was no odor whatsoever. And I'm not 100% sure what that even means. You would expect, I think, that eventually that's going to change. And then they do use additives. We explained that if their system's functioning properly and they're only putting things they should into their septic tank, that they really don't need those additives that are all those sorts of issues. And so you can see there, as we talk to them though, we found out that it's a blended family. They, 2 folks who both had their own kids and then got married, and they went from 3 people to 6, I think, or more than that, because they added 2 bedrooms, and now they have a 6-bedroom home with the original septic tank that's 1,050 gallons. And so we realized that's really what the issue is. Their tank and drain field is undersized for the number of people living there. And that's why we're seeing that discharge reaching the surface. And so, yeah, our main recommendation really is that it's inadequately sized. Adding the 2 bedrooms and having 5 people or more sometimes living in the home is, it can't handle it. And so they need to understand. Yeah, so we're suggesting they speak to a registered installer to seek a remedy. And other than that, yeah, you can, I won't read through all of these, but it's a standard set of recommendations, including take the private well class, what they should do on their well side as far as general recommendations and best practices related to that. So this tool is new. I know I made that clear already. And so the 2 assessments that I've described today are the only 2 that have been completed in the field. So where we've actually tried to test what we put in writing and thought we needed to do. And we did certainly use some folks who have a lot more experience. I mentioned NAURA and RCAP folks who are doing on-site work all the time. And so the tool's probably pretty close, but the other side of this is there's probably things that we're missing. Different parts of the country use different terms. We ran into a number of issues, different types of systems whenever you go from one state to the next. And so what we expect is starting October 1, the grant that RCAP and we have includes RCAP staff completing 200 assessments just on the wastewater treatment side on-site systems over the next 2 years. And it's described as a pilot for that very reason. And we did this with the well assessment tool. The first year, we only did a certain number of well assessments so that we could then get feedback from all the folks in the field that are doing that work and running into real situations where it may not be like what we were used to, the folks that developed that tool. And so we're going to compile all those changes, additions, edits, suggestions as they complete assessments. And then, and if anyone else uses it, the same thing. This tool is freely available to anyone, but then we're going to wait until that work is done and then try to identify how we want to change and update this tool to create kind of version 2.0. The well assessment tool went through at least 3 or 4 changes. I don't expect that with this, because we've learned from what happened with the well assessment. You know, we started making changes every 3 or 4 months, and instead this time we're going to use it as is and take all the recommendations and then sit down with all the folks who have a stake in this and come together and make changes we can all agree on, or additions or whatever needs to be done, so that it makes it more useful and better for whoever might want to use it. And you know, we expect that to be sometime in 2025. Yeah. And so the last thing I want to mention is some things that are going on with us. So next Thursday, we have a sister program to our private well class. It's called wateroperator.org. It provides resources for community water and wastewater operators mostly, but we also include a lot of decentralized information. And so next week we're hosting a webinar on decentralized resources. It's focusing on tribal environmental professionals, but it's really open to anyone. And it will go through a lot of the resources we have links to from other sources. It's kind of an aggregate. We aggregate information and we vet it so that it's the best information available. And if you're not familiar with WOO, which is wateroperator.org, it's really a clearinghouse of information. It's got 2 main features. One is we link to about 15,000 documents that are from about 900 organizations. Those are all the state agencies, all the water and wastewater organizations and membership organizations, USDA, US EPA. It's all things that there's no fluff, and there's no it's not like searching Google where you're going to come up with a bunch of ads or any of that sort of stuff. It's all information we vet, and we actually write a summary of every one of them. The other part of that website is a calendar, and currently it's it lists all the training that's available for credit to maintaining an operator license for water and wastewater operators in all 50 states. And so that includes, that's about 13,000 events a year that provide CEUs to water and wastewater operators, and we have them all in one calendar that's searchable. So on the decentralized side, there's a lot of other classes and all those things. And so part of our grant that starts October 1, which we expect to launch a website sometime early next year, that's just focused on decentralized wastewater, and including a very similar calendar that has all the decentralized type training for installers, pumpers, inspectors for the entire country. And we don't know when that's going to launch exactly. We're having a little trouble with the University of Illinois and getting the URL we need. I was hoping to announce that today, and I asked for it in June, and it's now September 21st, and I still don't have it. So, but we should have that soon. You can contact us, but there will be, we'll include resources from all the groups that provide wastewater and decentralized information. We aggregate it. It actually sends you back to their website, so we're not taking other people's stuff and calling it our own. We actually link to it so that you know where the resource is coming from. We just make sure that we only link to resources that are useful. And so it's a great way to have somebody else go through the legwork of creating a small summary of every document and putting all that information in one place so that it's easy for you to find. And then starting April 1st, 24, we're going to take on the EPA's private well hotline. And just want to make everyone aware of that. It'll be a big change for us. Currently, their hotline gets several hundred calls, I believe, a month. And so we have agreed to do that. And I think we're well suited for it, to be quite honest. Our groundwater section and our folks in the private well program have a lot of experience. So, and then lastly, we haven't had an in-person conference for the private well class since 2019. We've had 2 virtual conferences since then, but we will be having a private well conference next May. We haven't got all the details worked out yet, but it's going to be out west, and which we tried to move it around before the pandemic. We had one in Champaign and one in Pennsylvania, and so this one is going to be somewhere out west, and we hope to do that again every 2 years. They're all recorded, so if you're not familiar with the private well class conference, it's really practical information for practitioners. It's not a research conference, and we record every presentation. They're all on our website and our YouTube page, and so if you're interested in the kind of information that's there, I guarantee you, especially the first 2 that were in person, there's a lot of really useful information on almost any topic related to private wells. Okay, with that, Katie, do we have any questions?
Yep, there are a few.
Okay, let me pull that up. Okay. What water quality indicators would you recommend for a quick, low-cost indicator suite for wastewater contamination due to on-site wastewater disposal? I would say it's nitrate and coliform, right? Those are, I mean, a lot of times when a well has nitrate or coliform and they can't get rid of it from shock chlorinating, it's because there's some kind of connection between the drain field and the well, whether that's whether the well's shallow or whether there's a breach in the well. I mean, that's why you test with coliform for coliform and nitrate. It's to because you'll right, and so that's what I would use. Yeah, I don't know what else. You know, our septic systems, our wastewater systems, on-site wastewater systems, have almost every type of chemical under the sun, because we have all those kind of chemicals from the medicine we take, antibiotics, PFAS chemicals. You know, we are running into that now where someone has PFAS in a well and there's no rhyme or reason on why. And more times than not, it ends up being because of the septic system. It's putting it, and it's just because it's everywhere. And I guess I'm saying that as an example of, you know, there's a lot of work that's shown pharmaceuticals and personal care products that get into shallow aquifers or from septic or from wastewater systems. But I'd say the best indicators are still going to be coliform and nitrate, because that's, you know, a significant concentration in our wastewater. Yeah. Okay, I don't find in the library resource area of the web page the documents used in this assessment. Are they available? As far as, I guess, are you asking about the documents that we list at the end? I guess that's, I'm going to assume that's what you mean. So one, the documents that are in the end, Sally put together, and she's gone this week, so I don't have those on our webpage. We have updated our webpage to include all the septic or all the on-site wastewater information or the tool, because I mentioned earlier, we don't want to just put up the PDF. We want to put up the fillable PDF, and that'll be it's a few days away, and that's my fault that it's not done. So what we plan to do is by Monday, when this recording is available, and it'll be on our YouTube page, we send out an email to everyone who registered to say, hey, the recording's available. And we'll also include a link to a page on the private well class where this assessment tool will be listed, along with, you can get to the well assessment tool now on our webpage. And if that's what you mean by documents, I hope. If that's not what you mean, email us at info@privatewellclass.org and I'll get back to you. So So I think this work is interesting. I would like to follow its progress. Will there be one point of contact for updates on or progress reports? Yeah, you can contact me. I manage our program here. Obviously, we work closely with RCAP, but this is our deliverable on the EPA grant. And so anything we do to update this will come through us. And there is, yeah, and my email address, I'm just going to type it in here, is sdwilson@illinois.edu. You can always contact me, and depending on what you do, who you're with, all those things, we're wide open to working with whoever. If you've got experience in this area, we want this to be used by professionals, and we're more than willing to listen to everybody else's opinion. So, yeah, hopefully that helps answer your question. Well, thank you. It's almost 1:30 my time, which is our hour and a half today. This is a mistake. Usually our webinars are worth 2 CEUs or 2 CEs. This particular webinar is from a different deliverable, and it's only an hour and a half. And so if you have any other follow-up questions, you can email us at info@privatewellclass.org. If you're looking for a certificate or the slide deck, the same thing. And I appreciate everyone who was here today. All right. Now, when I shut this down, I lose everybody. So, Katie, thank you. And everyone have a great afternoon.